Hello, welcome back, and thanks for joining me. I'm going to go through getting out of the 8-bar loop, the loop of hell. This has been coming up a lot in my one-on-one sessions, so I thought I'd bring it up and give some tips on how to combat that. I don't produce that way, but I know a lot of people do, and that's fine. There's no right or wrong. I've set up a loop, very basic, just for demonstration purposes. I wasn't going to open up a full project with everything going on. Let's take a listen to it. 142 BPM. There's enough elements in there to sort of get moving. So kick at the top, offbeat bass. We have this sort of effect here. Percussion, stab sound at the start, bit of a vocal. Synth. Now, how it started, people kept asking me, well, I start in a loop phase, they loop 1 bar, and they start their project. They've opened it up, template, no template, mainly sample based, they start throwing things in there. Sure, great, beautiful. But they'll find they'll get a few elements in there, they've spent some time, they've maybe done some processing, some grouping. Essentially, they get to this stage, fast forward to where we are, where it sounds like there's enough in there to maybe carry on with creating the actual track itself. There's enough elements in there to get started, but how do I actually get out of that? Even though I don't produce this way, what I've been doing with producers is, you're here, you're a bit stuck, referencing. Reason being, already just from the waveform, let's pump this up. Just from the waveform of the track, you can typically see how a song is structured. Probably an intro there, filtered bass. This is my track. Gets a bit heavier in here. You can see here, again, probably the kick or filtered bass has come in. The meat and potatoes of the track comes in here. Another breakdown, more tracks, more of the track itself, a few little details into the last part, breakdown, last drop, outro. So what I have been recommending is simply already, I've got this at the same BPM as this track. Set your markers, don't be shy. So if we keep it as intro, let's get it to there. Probably, so the actual first break will come around here. We'll set another marker there. This part's up to you. You can either split it here and be a lot more detailed and capture this little breakdown here before getting to the breakdown itself. And then that's the last drop. There's your outro. Also, where each marker is, and again, the beauty about markers is you can be as detailed and as hectic as you want. You can put 400 in there and label them when a hat comes in, when a ride comes in, or whatever. More so if you're inexperienced and a bit early on, maybe that's a better way to do it. Depends how your workflow is. But on top of the markers, because, it can get a bit hectic looking at it all, at each marker, split it up, Command E, and just change the colors. Let's make that a bit more distinguishable. Let's leave that green. And you can find common colors where you might leave all the breaks green and all the main parts of the track or airtime of the track the same color, like such. And then, outro, you can maybe match that purple again, like that. That will also help now mind you, we haven't even pressed play on the reference track. This is just how much you can get from the waveform itself. Obviously, if you've got the reference track there, it's probably something you are inspired by or maybe look to get into a similar pocket to production-wise. Nothing wrong with that. And it's just a GPS, it's a roadmap. It just sets up a basic foundation that you can somewhat replicate. But even then, once you start getting through your track itself, we're not using it as gospel or the Bible. You can change it, right? This is just a basic foundation to help you get from A to B. Then as your track's evolving and you're adding extra channels, extra sounds, and you're processing, you can shift these markers. You can extend the playtime. You can shorten the breakdown. You might delete one breakdown. You might have 5 breakdowns. I don't know what you're into. But keep that in mind. This is just visually, you can sort of see where you're at. And what I've done here is, we might as well make this purple. Intro and outro is purple. Green are your sort of breakdowns. And then we'll go yellow. Yellow is the main play time of the track. Now, technically, it depends on your style of DJing. I would say this here that I've highlighted, if we just make that red for a second, that there is normally the airtime of the track. Being a DJ myself, you're typically mixing in and out of the track, you're beat matching, so you're overlapping the two purple parts. So even though we'll hear hints of that coming through in the mix, essentially the airtime is generally around that red zone. So keep that in mind as well. That's sort of your main part to show off, or the actual meat and balls of the track. So already you've got your loop set up, right? One thing we do know for sure, let's do kick and bass at the top. I'll change that color. Let's do that. Already kick and bass, even though the start is filtered, you can simply do this. Get that. Oh, and you can set an end marker too. Let's do that. And you can label these numbers. Command R, you can rename them, put them what you like. That's what I mean before. You can be as detailed as your pleasure. So, we're talking about techno here. The kick's going to run through almost the whole part of the track. Now, depending how detailed you want to get, if you are replicating something similar or you're inspired by the producer, you can even go in, at least to get the party started, sort of mimic where maybe the filtered kicks are. And then again, this is not all set in stone. This can all be undone. It can all be deleted. But it is a good starting point if you are struggling with structure and arrangement. This is maybe a good habit early on, just to also get used to seeing different styles of producers, how they're structuring tracks and setting up things. That's one thing. I can do the same in the intro here. And again, these might be filtered, but just deleting them so you know where you're at. So already, even if this is going to change, because we're not going to just rip it off like for like, we have somewhat of a structure, even though it's going to evolve and change. But like the kick and bass, besides some filtering, double kicking, essentially is going to run, especially being 4/4, it's going to run through almost the entire length of the track. You can sort of do this how you please, but let's say an offbeat hat, which was here. Yep. Typically, most of your percussion can potentially, or maybe get stacked. I like to stack mine. You know, just for different parts of it. Maybe you won't have it on the drop, but you have it on the outro, right? It's like fucking Tetris. This effect here might only come on every 4 beats as like an exaggeration point, same as a breakdown. And you'll start to see as well, you'll probably find a lot of these common points keep reappearing because they're not like long loops audio, they're not melodies, they're just little details that come into play. Here we had like a bit of a perk. Oh, sorry, that's the vocal. Let's zoom in on this. Here was the perk. Again, this is very simple, right? I got fucking 7 channels there, but you get the point. Copy and pasting that over, and then so on and so forth. Now, let's say this synth, even though it's in your loop phase, obviously it's not going to just be blasted static the whole way through the track. But this is where you could maybe at least do this and say, you know what, well, I don't want it to be in the intro. I do want it to be part of the main drop, but it's statically on the whole time. This is where you can start just setting up some automation. Auto filter's your best friend. It's definitely mine. And just setting really simple frequency blends. I prefer auto filtering versus volume automation. But already like this, right? We'll start hearing it come up. So already taking those kicks out is setting up these little details within the structure of your track already. And now we have the synth in full volume, right? Now you might, that synth, obviously, that's just a sample. You might be drawing a MIDI, it might be evolving. The patterns are changing. you can still use auto filter to bring that in and out. You always don't need to just delete it and get rid of it. You can play with the automation of that. Same with these. Now, this is a very basic setup for the video, but already you can see the general concept and approach to this. Now, what I like to do, I've got my markers set up. Let's listen to the reference track. I won't play it for too long because of copyright, but essentially, what's it doing? So it's somewhat filtered in the intro. The bass is kicked in, it's a bit more dominant. Now what I'm doing is, I'm looking for, okay, well, when's the percussion coming in? When's it coming out? How are they introducing it? Are they double kicking? Are they filtering the kick? And then they add the next layer or the next sample, the next sound, little things like that. So for example, this hi-hat, very simple. Let's get a ride. Let's go just 909. Let's keep it simple. Can't go wrong. Where are ya? Beautiful. This is very basic sound, but nonetheless, you'll get the point. So let's consolidate this. I personally, at each marker or almost every 2 bars or bar like that, I like to stack sounds. So if that was my percussion, let's group this as percussion. And we'll change that color, make it obvious. Depending how you produce, let's say this might be flowing from the start, this perk here. Obviously the intro is normally a bit more stripped back from the start and it builds as it gets to the break or the drop or the main part, and the same as the outro, it sort of tames off, it starts dropping off. That's to be considered too, as you're building the track, you've got all your elements, not everything's going to get used from the start, obviously. Let's say here though, consolidate this. I might be having the kick come out to then introduce that hat, right? And then same here. Bit loud. But what's happening is naturally momentum and anticipation is building because the kick's coming out. We're stacking percussion as the track's evolving. This is starting to come into play with the synth of the auto filter because you can see at the start, it's obviously we can't hear it, but as it's building, by the time we sort of get to that pinch point, a few things happen at once. The kick comes out, the synth's getting in volume, we probably first start to hear it, then that starts evolving with the new ride that's come in. And then we've brought that vocal back. Now, even if we set up effects, let's just type in sweep. That will do. Ignore the sound, it's a horrible sound, but ignore it. So let's say we have sweeps. I like to use sweeps. The way I use them, probably common, but up to you. I'll probably find it happening at each sort of exclamation mark of the track. And again, like I was saying before, sometimes a lot of this stuff, it's not set and forget, but will follow a very basic appearance. You know, it's just a small detail to help the track be more full. You know, something like that, it's probably almost done. That's for my style anyway. Then this little sweep. We can use the sweep and then the impact or the effect on the one shot at the 4/4 at the start to talk to each other, but help introduce and remove different elements. So again, if I'm going to add another percussion loop, get out of there. Let's go to, where are we? We'll go in here. No, we want loops, here we go. Even though we've got a hat, let's add a loop in. And again, I'm stacking. And you can see the samples, it's like Tetris, but as your project's going along, we can see and we know where it starts to pick up. So basic intro, effect on the drop. We're hinting the vocal. We let it go, we let it run out. Not much is happening. Not too much is happening. But very quickly now, we can start building the pace. Same thing here. You might want to exaggerate the synth. Now we've added the extra loop, the extra percussion loop. Again, it just stacks it. Me, typically, I do this. This is what you're seeing now is how I structure a song, basically. Let's get, say, a snare. Great snare, but let's just ignore it. I'm not trying to make everything work right now. But then again, like maybe that last push before the kick comes out or the bass comes out, I want that last exclamation mark or that last pickup of intensity before we maybe take the kick out, before we get into the actual track that's going to be mixed out and we start hearing it. Industrial. Let's bury that in the mix, but you get the point of it picking up. And then these are sweeps and effects. You can be as busy or frequent as you like. Now, once we get to there, I normally like to say bring this back down and bring it back up. Very basic 101 breakdown, right? But demo to help understand how I would approach getting out of the 8-bar loop if you're stuck and if you start your projects that way. Pick it up here. Then strip it back. So I'm not going to keep carrying on. That's basically what my approach would be if I produced that way and if I was getting stuck. I've passed this on to people in private sessions. It's been helping, it's been working because, and everyone works and thinks differently, but it can just help us give a bird's eye view. It can maybe release a bit of anxiety or a bit of stress of thinking that I've got a loop of, you know, a couple seconds, but I need to make 4 or 5 minutes. That might be daunting if you're already stuck at that few second loop. Just extending your kick out in general can give you a bit of confidence that, okay, well, the kick's mainly going to play throughout the track. If I set those markers up, allow for some breakdowns in the outro, at least you've got the skeleton or the bare backbone of the track. And then from there, you'll find a lot of elements are going to keep repeating throughout the track, especially when we're talking about this style of music. And then, even though, let's say we started with 8 channels or 7 channels, 7 samples, that's going to evolve as you actually open the project up and you get to see what the end result could look like. So already, very quickly, it's not finished. We did this very fast. But rather than, if we go back to the start, we just looped 7 channels, we had our little loop, we're starting to see a structure and format of a track, whether you like it or not. And that's it. So, great starting point, more geared towards beginners or people who maybe just lack confidence to get out of the loop phase. Just know, draw your kick out, have a reference track. We're not using the reference track to rip it off. We just want to get a good idea of the structure of it, set your markers up, go from there. On top of that, anything you set as a marker or taking your kicks out doesn't need to stay like that. You have full control and take full control. It is your song. And you'll see how quickly you can start to evolve. And remember, whatever you had in that loop is not be all and end all. The sounds you had in there, some might get taken out as the track evolves or progresses, and you're going to add a lot more because you're going to have more than 7 channels in your track. So, hope that helps. Hit like, hit subscribe. We'll see you soon.